In this video, I want to talk about the new changes to the highway code and how this affects everybody when it comes to their driving tests or even safe driving for life. But what I want to highlight is specifically the language that's being used in the highway code. I'm just going to read this to you. Okay? Giving people that are walking across and people cycling going straight ahead priority when turning in and out of junctions. So if I'm coming up to a give way line and a cyclist is coming from my right or left, I'm giving way to them. That's kind of obvious. I really don't think we need to be talking about that. I mean, that should really be happening regardless. They're a vehicle on the road, but this includes people waiting to walk across the road as well, right? So if I'm coming up to a junction and there's a pedestrian on the side of the road and they want to walk across the road, I should be giving them priority. They need to get across a junction and they need to get across it as safely as possible. So for me to give way to them as I'm approaching a give way line is absolutely no problem at all. There is also a change to the rule that if I'm turning into a road, I should be giving way to a pedestrian or a cyclist that wants to go straight ahead. So if I've just passed a cyclist, and you need to ask yourself the question, should I have passed that cyclist in the first place? So I teach that if you're approaching a junction where you want to turn left, do not overtake a cyclist as you're approaching it. If you overtake the cyclist as you're approaching it and then you go to turn, you're going to affect the cyclist, in which case that shouldn't happen. Now, I've been teaching this for a long time already. I really can't see a problem with this at all. But let's say, for example, you're about to turn left and you check your mirrors and there's a cyclist coming up on your left-hand side. You now have to wait to let them come through before you turn. This is what's in the highway code. However, the language that they're using is the word should. You should allow them to turn before you turn. Language. And likewise, if I'm turning into a junction and there's a pedestrian waiting to cross, I need to allow them to cross before I turn. I initially had a few issues with this because I was envisaging situations where let's say, for example, I've come round a bend and I'm about to turn left into a junction. There are pedestrians that are waiting to cross. So I come to a stop in the middle of the road just around the bend and allow these pedestrians to cross. Now, let's say this is a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit road. And behind me, a car comes flying around the corner, breaking the speed limit, and there I am sitting in the middle of the road. That poses a risk, danger to us. And I think anybody that's got concerns about that is completely valid. But again, the language that's being used in the highway code is you should give way to pedestrians waiting to cross. Flip that to pedestrian crossings, which is in the highway code itself. And if a pedestrian is approaching a pedestrian crossing, you should give way to a pedestrian crossing. If a pedestrian is on the crossing, the wording changes to you must give way to pedestrian crossings. Now, this is a subtle nuance of language, but ultimately it's there. And again, revisions are coming within the highway code. But if I'm hearing should and must, I see a difference there. When it comes to driving tests, we're going to need a little bit more clarity on this because how we're going to be judged, this is important. Okay, so leaving at least 1.5 meters when overtaking cyclists under 30 miles an hour. Yep, that's fine, 1.5 meters. If they wobble in wind, we wouldn't want them coming into our path. So therefore, that kind of makes sense to me. Over 30 miles an hour, it needs to be 2 meters. That means you could be on the wrong side of the road. Horse riders or horse-drawn vehicles, again, the same thing, must leave at least 2 meters of space when overtaking. These are revisions in the highway code. I'm just doing this real quick. Again, this kind of makes sense to me. I mean, if you're overtaking a horse, the last thing you want to be doing is getting too close too fast because that will spook the animal and it's dangerous. Don't do it. I mean, I've been teaching drive past horses really slowly for quite a long time. Allowing at least 2 meters of space when somebody is walking in the road. No brainer. They're in the road. Keep them safe. So the introduction of the Dutch reach. The Dutch reach is when you got to open your door and you open your door now with the other hand. Okay, so depending on where the roadside is, if I would normally open my door, I would open it with my right and I would open the door, check in my mirror and over my shoulder to make sure it's safe and open the door. Now, when you open with your other hand, it forces your body to twist all the way around and look over your shoulder. Now, why is it called the Dutch reach? Because the Dutch have been doing this for years and the Dutch have a lot of cyclists and they kind of know how to deal with cyclists. And we've had a massive boom of cyclists since the pandemic. There are more of us, more of them on the roads. So therefore, we need to keep them as safe as possible, right? People cycling encouraged to sit in the center of their lane when riding. Now, when they're going past parked cars, they should be 1 meter or a door's width in case a door opens on them. But hey, if we're all doing our Dutch reach, then we shouldn't be opening the doors on cyclists anyway. Why is this rule in the highway code? Well, if a cyclist is all the way to the left, cars will just zoom past them and not care about their safety. But if they're in the middle of the road, you've now got to think about when it's safe for you to overtake them. Now, if that means I've got to sit behind them for a while, that's so be it. Now, they can also ride two abreast. So if they're riding in groups, if it's safer for them to do it, they can now ride two abreast in the middle of the road. Now, the changes to how the practical test is going to be assessed. The practical test is going to be affected. Now, they've also said it's going to take a little bit of time for examiners, for pedestrians, for cyclists to understand these new rules. And that's the other thing, is the message getting out there to all the different parties involved? Are they all reading it? Are car drivers, are drivers reading it? I mean, obviously, if any of you lot are watching this channel or any other channel that's talking about this and you're interested in learning to drive, that means you're constantly educating yourself. But the people that don't drive, how often do they read the highway code? Yes, it's been on the news, but it's going to take time for some people to get up to speed with what the rules are. And the examiner is supposed to take this into consideration. Now, the rule H1 is now listing this as a hierarchy of responsibility. So the larger the vehicle you are, the more responsibility you have. Did you know that as a cyclist, if you're approaching a junction and a pedestrian wants to cross, you are to give way to them, much in the same way that a driver of a car is to give way to you as a cyclist as you're coming across the junction, or me as a cyclist, because I do cycle sometimes, or a pedestrian that wants to come across the road. So there is a hierarchy within the rule H1. So if you're a coach driver and you want to turn left, you've got to pay extra due care and attention to any potential cyclist that could be coming up. The reasoning for the changes in the highway code is to make things safer for everybody. Does this mean a little bit more work for car drivers? Yes, it does. Absolutely. Does this reinforce values or ideas that I've already been teaching? Yes. Does it add a few more with the pedestrians waiting to cross at junctions? A little bit, and it's something to think about. But again, coming back to the language, and language is really important. You should give way to pedestrians that are waiting to cross the mouth of a junction if you are turning into or out of the junction. And then the language changes for pedestrian crossings, as we already know. You must give way to pedestrians that are on a pedestrian crossing. Language is important. How this affects your driving test, this is also important. Yes, I know we like everything to be black and white. What is the clarity? However, there is always mitigating circumstances in your driving test. Certain situations will escalate because of other factors that are occurring. It may be a minor fault. I see it in mock tests all the time. Someone signals a little bit early, doesn't affect anybody, not a problem. Someone signals a little bit early, car behind seems to be getting very confused. That now escalates into a serious fault as they try to overtake. So we're going to have to look at situations in their individual merit and work out what is the right thing for us to do. This is a really busy time of day. This is Saturday morning around Portobello Market, not far from Portobello Market. A lot of pedestrians, a lot of people about, lots of traffic. I should be giving way to these pedestrians, but I am in the middle of a roundabout. I should, but should I? At that particular moment, should I have stopped on a mini roundabout to allow those pedestrians to cross? Now, if I look at this purely from a risk management perspective, this is what I'm trained in, I would say no, get out of there. Is an examiner gonna penalize me for that? Is an examiner gonna penalize you for that? And again, this is where the language comes into play. I should. I should be giving way, not I must. These are the rules at a glance. So, and again, if you want me to go into more detail, I'm more than happy to do that. Anyway, if you're getting any value out of this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and then you know when the next video is coming out. But in the meantime, I'll see you in the next one.